This is Scott Drake, and you're watching the Legal Broadcast Network. Oakland police are reviewing the deadliest day ever for their department to see if any mistakes were made in confrontations with an armed parole violator. And prosecutors were examining how parole officials tried to monitor the gunman before he killed 4 officers, or actually 3 officers, and left one brain dead who's now been taken off life support. My guest to comment is former Deputy District Attorney and prosecutor in Los Angeles and principal at the Kraut Law Group, Mike Kraut. Thanks for talking to us again, Mike. We've been talking to you a lot lately.
No problem.
This is terrible, and I guess there's no way to second guess the police here, but you've got 4 officers killed after a routine traffic stop. It just seems hard to believe that could happen. And I know that there were 2 separate incidents, one at the traffic stop and then one later on when SWAT team members encountered the suspect. But it just seems hard to believe that 4 guys would get killed like this.
It's unusual, but it happens, and that's probably why most people think when they're pulled over for a traffic stop and the cop isn't quite so friendly, now they can understand why they have to be on their guard at all times.
What is procedure then, talking about a typical traffic stop here? I've been stopped before by police for traffic violations or things like that, and they do stand back there a while, and they take a lot of precautions to make sure that I, who I say I am, or that I'm not any kind of a threat. In this particular case, you've had 2 officers, and one is usually in backup, taking another position. What's procedure here, and how do 2 guys get shot?
Well, first of all, when I was a prosecutor, I did a lot of education and training for the different law enforcement agencies in Southern California. And the one thing is always drilled into everybody's mind is that there is no such thing as a routine traffic stop, whether you're stopping the blue-haired grandmother going to church or you're in the most gang-infested area. There is no routine traffic stop. What you look for when you stop, first thing you want to do is be able to identify the vehicle and see if there's any warrants associated with the vehicle, because you can assume that if there's a warrant for the vehicle, and it may include the person inside of it, and that puts you a little more on heightened alert. So oftentimes when they stop and they tell you to turn the car off, what they're doing is running your plates and running the make and model to make sure the plates fit that make and model of the car, and they aren't a stolen car or a stolen plate. Next thing often happens is they make their approach. CHP has one procedure, and that is always approach from the passenger side window, and that's mainly to stop themselves from getting hurt or killed from a car that veers off and hits the officer while he's conducting his business. It also allows them to look into the back of the window forward and see if anybody's arming themselves, and it's not the normal way in which the driver would be able to turn easily if he was going to make an assaultive attack.
Now, it seems to me that the contrary, that approaching from the passenger side, although it would protect you from traffic, would be easier for a driver to turn and use a weapon on you as you approach the vehicle on that side, especially if he was right-handed.
That's not really true, because remember, you're approaching from behind and you're able to see through the rear of the vehicle, so you're actually in a more covered position, and you'd be able to see if the person begins to turn and they'd have to turn back and around. You'd have much more of a view of a person moving their arms versus if they put the gun up towards their chest and just put it over their shoulder blade and start shooting. You wouldn't be able to see the gun in the front as you approached on the driver's side. That being said, every police agency does things slightly different, but it's always to make sure that the officer is safe first and that the passenger or driver is safe second.
Well, this investigation obviously isn't over. 2 other officers were killed, or SWAT team members were killed, when they encountered the suspect, I think, at an apartment. What do you know about that, and how does that apply? Again, SWAT team members, they're wearing protection. They're expecting problems. How do they get killed?
Well, my understanding of Oakland officers is they all actually are wearing bulletproof vests when they approached. I would have most likely assumed that at the traffic stop they were shot in the head, and the same thing happened with the SWAT officers. I think they were trying to clear the house. They came upon a closet door and were about to open it, and the gunman shot through the door even before it was opened and was able to kill the other 2 SWAT officers, and then subsequently he himself was shot. The next thing in the next stage, as you mentioned, the investigation not being complete, is that the detectives assigned to this, and I'm sure they're going to be their elite group from Oakland and possibly the FBI, will look at the conduct of those people surrounding this 26-year-old gunman, the parolee. Somebody may have known he shot and then they hid him. That person will be charged with accessory after the fact, which is Penal Code Section 32, and they can serve a significant amount of time in prison. In an officer-related shooting, there's very little forgiveness by anybody, and most people will end up doing the maximum time.
This was an unprecedented event. I don't think Oakland, I don't know if California's ever had a day quite this bad. After the investigation, is complete, or as it continues, what's going on with the family finally, and how does the department handle the families of these men?
Well, the only precedence that I can tell you that's been identical to this is 4 officers killed in 1970 in a Los Angeles suburb called Newhall. And it was 4 CHP officers in a very similar situation. As far as how the department handles it, they're considered a very close family. It's going to be very disruptive to the facility. There'll be a tremendous amount of grief counseling brought in. People will be brought in order to assist them. Anybody on that shift will probably be given mandatory or voluntary vacations for a time period to bring their nerves back down. And they would deal with it as any of us would deal with a close family member who was tragically killed or murdered. They grieve, they work through it, and then they go on with their mission.
Mike Kraut is a former deputy district attorney and prosecutor in Los Angeles, and he is principal at the Kraut Law Group at krautlawgroup.com. Mike, thanks for your time once again.
No problem. Thank you.
This is Scott Drake, and you're watching the Legal Broadcast Network. This is Scott Drake, and we know that as an attorney, you're very busy. That's why we have more content just like this at your fingertips, conveniently located at legalbroadcastnetwork.com. Thanks for watching.